Tophia Chu, better known online as Tophia Chu, existed in a strange digital limbo. Not famous, not unknown. A constant presence on TikTok lives, broadcasting a life that always seemed on the verge of collapse, yet never quite reached a conclusion. Viewers came and went, critics circled, but the story dragged on, until real tragedy forced the internet to choose whether it would keep watching or finally step back. In early 2024, everything changed. A violent carjacking involving Tophia and her family left one person dead, her brother. And for the first time in years, sympathy replaced skepticism. Viewers who had spent months criticizing her behavior suddenly paused. Donations poured in. A GoFundMe was created. Thousands of people, many of whom didn't even like her, believed this was finally the moment where compassion mattered more than commentary.
I looked out, and this guy was trying to come into the car. And I looked over. My brother was missing an eye. He was missing his eye, and I knew he was dead at that point. You wouldn't let this guy do that.
For a brief window, the internet gave Tophia something it rarely gives anyone indefinitely: grace. But grace is fragile, especially when it's built on trust.
At the head, I didn't know he was shot. I didn't know anything. I was freaking out at that point, but I was trying to keep calm, and he went to my side. He busted my window out.
As the weeks passed, questions began to surface, not immediately and not loudly. At first, it was just confusion. Why was she still live streaming daily? Why were there clips of her shopping while claiming to have no money? Why did discussions about employment never seem to materialize, even as expenses mounted and shelter deadlines loomed? None of these moments alone were enough to undo the goodwill she had earned, but together they formed a pattern, one that many viewers had seen before. By April, it became clear that the GoFundMe funds had not yet been released. That part is confirmed. What became controversial was everything happening around that delay. Tophia continued asking for money through other platforms, explaining that bills, storage fees, phone payments, and moving costs had already consumed what she had received directly from supporters. She spoke often about what she needed, but rarely about how she planned to stabilize her situation long term.
I'm going to need a lot of money to move. I'm going to need a lot of money to have my storage moved. I'm going to need money for last month's rent, deposit, whatever it is that I need, especially when it comes to application fees, background checks, all of that stuff. I am going to need money for that. On top of that, I can't afford nothing. I can't even come online and be like.
At the same time, people began spotting her in public: malls, stores, cafes. Nothing illegal, nothing inherently wrong, but deeply uncomfortable when placed next to live streams describing desperation. Each new photo chipped away at the remaining trust, not because people expected perfection, but because they expected consistency. Then came the revelation that reframed everything. Online researchers confirmed that Tophia's brother had already been cremated, with services covered by the state. What followed was not a clear explanation, but a storm of confusion. Tophia stated that the GoFundMe was still necessary to bury her brother's ashes properly, including a plot and headstone.
Oh, and let's clear up what the state paid, because I'm so sick and tired of people saying the state already paid. No, the state did not already pay. So I'm going to explain that to you because it's literally pissing me off. So let's get this out of the way. Cremated people can be buried. My grandmother and grandfather are buried, and they're cremated. So for people saying that you can't bury cremated people, yes, you can. You can also have them entombed. I didn't want him entombed. I wanted him buried, with his urn. Because if we have his urn, it runs a risk or a chance of people trying to steal him. So yes, he can be buried. He will have a plot. He will have everything. So the state only paid up to $6,000 because they paid for the service. They paid for the casket. They paid for the urn.
Some accepted this explanation, others didn't, and the divide that followed would never fully close again, because from that moment on, the narrative shifted. This was no longer just a story about grief. It was about credibility, about responsibility, and about what happens when an audience that once wanted to help begins to feel like it's being asked to ignore what it can plainly see. By the time summer arrived, sympathy hadn't vanished, but it had thinned, and in its place grew something far more dangerous for an online figure who relies on attention to survive: indifference. And this was only the beginning. By May, The gap between what Tophia said online and what people believed offline had widened into something impossible to ignore. Publicly, her message stayed consistent. She was waiting on the GoFundMe. She was doing everything she could. She was overwhelmed, watched, targeted. According to her, the delays weren't her fault. They were the result of trolls, false reports, and people determined to see her fail. And to be clear, there were people actively monitoring her movements, clipping her lives, and spreading her content across Reddit and other platforms. But scrutiny tends to intensify when money is involved. Around this time, photos began circulating of Tophia carrying shopping bags, most notably from Ross, a discount clothing retailer she had been seen at repeatedly over the years. Again, nothing illegal, nothing that proves misuse of GoFundMe funds, but to viewers who had donated believing every dollar mattered, the optics were brutal. Tophia denied that any GoFundMe money was being spent. She stated repeatedly that she did not have access to it, that a third party controlled the account, and that GoFundMe itself was still reviewing the situation. That explanation never changed. What did change was how often she was seen out shopping while simultaneously stating she couldn't afford basic necessities. When questioned, her responses were defensive, sometimes hostile, sometimes dismissive. Critics, she argued, had no proof. And technically she was right. No direct evidence ever surfaced showing GoFundMe funds being withdrawn by her personally. But trust doesn't disappear because of proof alone. Sometimes it disappears because of repetition.
Yeah, but we're still waiting for the GoFundMe to be processed because people said I was scamming. My family gave me money after my brother's service and I went and got stuff. And I guess someone filmed me and said I was using the GoFundMe money. I don't have access to it. My brother's friend does. And so GoFundMe is, I don't know if they're looking into it. They're still looking into it.
This was also the period when her online presence shifted. Her content increased. Live streams became longer, more frequent, and more emotionally charged. She spoke about hustling, about plans for housing, about long-term dreams that seemed disconnected from her immediate reality. At one point, she even suggested that the carjacking itself might not have been random, floating the idea that it could have been orchestrated by someone online. That claim was never substantiated, and no evidence was presented to support it. While attention remained focused on Tophia, another figure re-entered the public conversation: her father. Papa Chu was homeless, frequently arrested, and largely absent from Tophia's day-to-day narrative. According to Tophia, he had been abandoned due to safety concerns. According to critics, he had simply been left behind. The truth likely sits somewhere in between, but what was undeniable was the deterioration of the entire family structure. At the same time, rumors began circulating about the shelter Tophia was staying in. Allegedly, it was a temporary arrangement, possibly limited to around 90 days, designed to help residents find employment and transition into stable housing. This policy was never officially confirmed, but the expectation to seek work during shelter stays is common. What was confirmed is this: during those months, Tophia did not secure employment. Instead, she dyed her hair, got her nails done, and further into social media. A new look emerged. Along with it came a sharper edge, especially toward creators who covered her story. Live streams became confrontational, accusations flew, and the tone shifted from explanation to resentment.
You could not see your comments, boo, but people were literally saying that y'all were having a mid-war. You sitting up here like you live in your grandma's house. Well, I live in my mom's house. Oh, well, you don't have a job. Well, I don't have a job either. What the fuck kind of argument is that? And is that what you really want to be known for? Why don't you, not even trying to be rude, but I'm literally giving some one-on-one game as if I was talking to a
sorry for cutting. Okay.
Why don't you get up and go out and get people and go to a job where you can be around people? Because this shit is not healthy. I agree with
It's
y'all.
not.
It's not.
Hey, we gotta
It's
stop
not.
cussing though, y'all.
Yeah, because we don't want the live to get
I'm even
banned.
noticing your body language right now, and I'm not.
Yes, she's disassociating.
You're disassociating.
The internet, once patient, was running out of reasons to wait. And then came the offer that would change everything, or expose the truth. In early summer, a TikTok user reached out publicly with what many viewers considered a genuine lifeline. The proposal was simple: temporary housing, assistance with transportation, and help getting settled. No donations required. For an audience that had spent months arguing about money, this felt like the solution everyone had been waiting for. If the problem was truly circumstance, then this was the reset. At first, Tophia acknowledged the offer. She didn't reject it outright. Instead, she hesitated. Her reasons shifted depending on the day. Sometimes it was safety, sometimes it was distance, sometimes it was distrust, fear that the offer was a setup or content bait or another attempt to humiliate her. To her supporters, these concerns sounded reasonable. To critics, they sounded familiar, because this wasn't the first opportunity that had stalled out. Over the years, there had been repeated moments where stability seemed within reach. Housing leads, job suggestions, assistance programs, each one eventually dismissed, delayed, or reframed as impossible. And while no one is obligated to accept help on someone else's terms, patterns are hard to ignore when they repeat long enough. As the housing offer lingered unresolved, the shelter timeline became more urgent. Whether it was a 90-day limit or simply a matter of policy enforcement, it became clear that Tophia's stay was temporary. She spoke about extensions, appeals, and exceptions, but nothing concrete materialized. Meanwhile, her live streams continued. She talked about goals that felt increasingly disconnected from her situation. Dreams of online success, long-term plans that relied heavily on future donations or hypothetical income. To viewers who had once hoped to see progress, it felt like the same loop repeating, only louder. The internet's tone changed again. This time, it wasn't anger, it was exhaustion. Comment sections that once debated details now fell quiet. Reaction channels slowed their uploads. Even critics seemed less invested. The story had stopped evolving, and without evolution, attention fades. Then, without much warning, the outcome arrived. Tophia and her family lost their shelter placement. The details surrounding the exit were never fully clarified. Some reports suggested the stay had simply ended. Others implied policy violations. What mattered more than the reason was the result. They were back where they started, without stable housing, without clear plans, and with far less public support than before.